You're not tired. You're living a life that's not yours. Have you ever noticed how, the more you try to control everything, the more life seems to slip out of your hands? It's almost ironic. You worry, you plan, you try to predict every detail, and yet something always comes out different. What if I told you that the problem is not the lack of control, but the excess of it? This is the silent trap that takes you away from your own inner freedom. The truth is that we have been conditioned to believe that we need external approval to validate who we are. That our identity depends on what others think, what we have achieved, what we have shown. But in this constant search, we end up disconnecting from our own essence. And the worst, he does not even realize that he is living an edited version of himself, guided by fear and the need for acceptance. But here's a point that can turn the key. When you start practicing detachment, something changes. Not on the outside, necessarily, but inside. Your consciousness expands, your personal narrative begins to transform, and you start to see life more clearly. And that's exactly what this content will show you: how this transformation happens and how it can reconnect you with your true purpose. Check it out. Many people live inside a prison that they don't even realize they built. Gradually, without realizing it, you shape your identity based on external approval, trying to fit into patterns you didn't even choose. It's like wearing an outfit that isn't yours, just because they said it looks better this way. And then, without noticing, his essence begins to be muffled. The most curious thing is that this prison has no visible bars. It is made up of fear, imaginary judgments, and the illusion of control. That feeling that, if you please everyone, you will avoid conflicts and ensure safety. But in practice, this only takes you away from your inner freedom. It's like trying to control the wind with your hands. Tiring and useless. Want a simple example? Think about the times you said yes but wanted to say no. Small choices like this shape your personal narrative, creating a version of you that is not fully authentic. The first step of awareness is to realize this on a daily basis. Because, from there, a possible transformation begins. And deep down, you already feel that there is something there asking for change, right? Living to please others seems, at first glance, a safe path. After all, who doesn't want to be accepted, praised, included? But the price of this is often high. You get to trade your own essence in exchange for crumbs of external approval. And, over time, this silent exchange weakens your identity, as if you were gradually diluting yourself. The problem is that this behavior creates a vicious cycle. The more you seek validation, the more dependent on it you become. And that's where fear comes in: fear of being displeased, of being rejected, of not responding. This traps you even more in this dynamic, taking you away from your authenticity and your inner freedom. It's like living on a stage all the time, without ever being able to get out of character. A simple exercise to start breaking this: choose a small situation in your day and practice detachment from other people's opinions. It can be something basic, like expressing your true opinion in a light conversation. It sounds silly, but this kind of attitude reprograms your consciousness and begins to transform your personal narrative. And when you realize you've already taken the first real step toward your own transformation, and perhaps, without realizing it, you're already beginning to question how far it's worth carrying that weight. There is a silent belief that many people carry that if they manage to control everything, life will finally get on track. But this idea is a great illusion of control. The more you try to predict, avoid mistakes, and adjust every detail, the more anxiety appears. Deep down, it doesn't bring inner freedom, it brings tension, as if you're always waiting for something to go wrong. And here comes an important point: excessive control is usually born of fear. Fear of failing, of losing, of not being enough. Then you try to control situations, people, and even your own identity, shaping behaviors to ensure acceptance. but it disconnects you from your essence and your authenticity, because truly living requires a certain level of uncertainty. Want to test this in practice? Start small, let something go off script. It could be not planning every minute of your day or accepting that not everything needs an immediate response. This type of detachment strengthens your awareness and changes your personal narrative little by little. And, curiously, it is when you let go of control a little that the true transformation begins to happen. Which leads to an inevitable question: if controlling everything doesn't work, why do we still insist on it? You know that strange feeling of achieving something you really wanted, and still feel an emptiness? Well, this happens when your life is aligned with external expectations, but disconnected from your essence. You achieve goals, accumulate results, receive external approval, but inside, nothing really fulfills. There is a lack of inner freedom, a lack of meaning. That's because many of these achievements were guided by an identity built to please, not to represent who you really are. It's like climbing a ladder and, at the top, realizing it was leaning against the wrong wall. And then comes that silent discomfort, which many people try to ignore by busying themselves even more. As if doing more solves what, in fact, requires depth. A good start is to practice a little awareness in your daily life. Ask yourself, does what I'm looking for have to do with me or with what is expected of me? It may seem simple, but this type of reflection changes your personal narrative. And, little by little, you begin a process of detachment from these empty goals, making room for a truer transformation. Because deep down, the question that begins to arise is what really matters to you. When your identity starts to depend too much on the opinions of others, you lose center. Every compliment lifts you up, every criticism brings you down, and your emotional stability is in the hands of others. This creates a silent reliance on external approval, where you only feel okay when someone confirms that you're on the right track. The problem is that, in this scenario, its authenticity is left aside. You start to adjust your way of thinking, acting, and even feeling, all to maintain an image that is accepted. And this further fuels the fear of rejection. At the end of the day, you're not living your life, you're managing others' perception of you. And that is tiring. Much more than it seems. A powerful practice here is to begin to strengthen your inner awareness. Instead of asking, what will they think of me? Try to reverse, does this make sense to me? This small adjustment already starts a process of detachment and rescues your inner freedom. Gradually, your personal narrative changes, and the transformation happens not because others approved, but because you finally started to listen to yourself. Which makes room for something even deeper. Detachment isn't about giving up everything or living without caring about anything. That's a myth. In fact, it has much more to do with freedom. It is the ability to relate to people, achievements, and situations without depending on them to define your identity. Ancient philosophies already spoke of this, and today's psychology reinforces: the less you cling to external control and approval, the closer you get to your essence. And here comes something interesting. Detachment does not eliminate fear, but it changes your relationship with it. You still feel it, of course, but you don't let it dictate your choices. This strengthens your conscience and puts you in a lighter position in life. It's like holding something in the palm of your hand instead of squeezing it tightly. When you relax, everything flows better. If you want to start practically, try to observe where you are getting too stuck. It could be someone's opinion, a specific outcome, or even an idealized version of yourself. Gradually, let go without haste. This process reconfigures your personal narrative and makes room for a true transformation, bringing you closer to your authenticity. And, curiously, it is at this point that an unexpected discomfort arises. After all, who are you when you stop clinging to masks? When you start practicing detachment, something curious happens. The fear of no longer knowing who you are arises. After all, for a long time your identity was built based on roles, expectations, and external approval. So, when these masks start to fall, that feeling of emptiness hits as if you were missing something, when in fact you are making space. This discomfort is part of the process. Your mind tries to protect you, pulling you back to the known, even if that known doesn't represent your essence. It's like taking off armor after years of wearing it. At first, it's insecure, but that's exactly where your consciousness expands, because you start to realize that it's not the role is the one behind it. A practical way to deal with this is to start observing yourself without judgment. Instead of trying to quickly define who you are, allow yourself to experiment. Test new ways of acting, speaking, deciding. This strengthens your authenticity and rewrites your personal narrative with more truth. This phase may seem unstable, but it is precisely this phase that prepares the ground for a profound transformation. And then an interesting dilemma arises: how far is it worth keeping tabs on who you should be? There's a curious paradox here. The more you try to control who you are, the less you access your authenticity. It seems contradictory, right? But it makes sense. When you're trying to adjust every detail of your behavior, you're not being you, you're being an edited version, shaped by external approval and fear of going out of the norm. Excess control creates a kind of constant filter before speaking, acting, or deciding. You go through, is this acceptable? And, in this process, its essence is being stifled. The illusion of control makes you believe that it protects you, but in practice, it takes you away from your inner freedom. It's like driving with a handbrake on. You can walk, but never fluidly. A simple exercise: try to act more spontaneously in small situations. Speak your mind with respect, of course. Choose what you really want, without so much calculation. This strengthens your awareness and begins to change your personal narrative. Gradually, you realize that you don't have to control everything to be accepted, and that's when true transformation gains strength. Which raises an important question: did the concept of success you follow also come from this control? From an early age, many people learn a script of what success is: having money, status, recognition, and of course, a lot of external approval. But this model does not always speak to your essence. You can even achieve all of this and still feel like something doesn't fit. Because success without inner freedom becomes just a beautiful showcase but empty inside. The problem is that these goals are often absorbed without question. They shape your identity and influence your choices, as if it were the only possible way. And then the illusion of control comes in again: if I achieve this, I will finally feel fulfilled. But, in practice, this promise rarely holds up, because it was not born of its truth. One way to start adjusting this is to revisit your goals more consciously. Ask yourself, does this make sense to me, or does it just feel right in the eyes of others? This type of reflection activates a process of detachment and resignifies your personal narrative. And little by little, you begin to align your choices with your true purpose, making room for a more authentic transformation. Which naturally leads to the next challenge: having the courage to stand up for who you really are. Being authentic seems beautiful in speech, but in practice it requires courage, and it is not little. When you start acting according to your essence, you can end up losing validations, relationships, and even opportunities that were based on your old identity. And that's when the fear comes up strongly, trying to convince you to go back to the comfortable. Even if that comfortable isn't true. But there is an important detail: what you lose by being authentic, most of the time, was no longer aligned with who you really are. It was sustained by external approval and the need for control. When you practice detachment, you realize that you are not losing, you are filtering. It is making room for connections, paths, and choices that are more coherent with your inner freedom. Want a practical way to get started? Pick one aspect of your life where you feel like you're hiding a bit. It could be your opinion, your style, your decisions. Take a small step towards your authenticity there. This strengthens your conscience and rewrites your personal narrative. And, little by little, this posture generates a real transformation. Because, in the end, the question is no longer will they accept me? And becomes, does this represent who I really am? There's a silent force guiding your life every day, your personal narrative. It's the stories you tell yourself about who you are, what you deserve, and how far you can go. If deep down you believe that you need external approval to have value, your identity will mold itself to that, and so will your choices. Do you see how it is not only what happens, but how you interpret it? The most interesting thing is that this narrative was often built back there, without much awareness. Comments, experiences, comparisons. All of this forms beliefs that seem to be absolute truths. And that's where the fear of changing this story comes in, because the unknown is scary. But maintaining a narrative that limits your authenticity is costly. It costs you your inner freedom. A powerful exercise: start observing your thoughts as if you were watching a movie. When something like "I'm not capable" or "this isn't for me" comes up, question it. Where did this come from? Does it make sense today? This type of reflection begins a process of detachment from these old stories. And, little by little, you rewrite your narrative with more truth, paving the way for a profound transformation. Which leads to one last essential step: consciously reconstructing who you choose to be. There comes a time when you realize your identity is not fixed, it is built, and it can be rebuilt. This does not mean ceasing to be who you are, but rather getting closer and closer to your essence. From the moment you develop awareness, you begin to choose, intentionally, which parts of you make sense to continue, and which ones are no longer useful. This process requires detachment, especially from the old versions that have been shaped by external approval and the illusion of control. And yes, it can be a certain fear after all. To change is to get out of the known. But it is precisely there that true inner freedom is born. You stop being an automatic response to the world and become a conscious construction of yourself. In practice, this can start with small decisions aligned with your purpose. Choose more truthfully, act more authentically, position yourself more clearly. Each of these attitudes rewrites their personal narrative and strengthens their transformation. And the most interesting thing is that this process never ends. Because, in the end, you're not trying to find yourself, you're learning, every day, how to create yourself. Now tell me, how many decisions in your life were really yours? And how many have been guided by fear, external approval, or the need to maintain an identity that no longer makes sense? This reflection can bother you a little, but it is precisely this discomfort that awakens your awareness and makes room for a true transformation. What if you started today? You don't have to change everything at once. How about taking a small step towards your authenticity? Where in your routine can you practice more detachment? Where can you choose more truthfully, even if it means getting out of the automatic? Remember, your personal narrative is being written every day, and you can take real control of it, without falling into the old illusion of control. In the end, the question that remains is: do you want to continue living to meet expectations? Or do you want to build a life with purpose, aligned with your essence and your inner freedom? The choice is yours, and it starts with the simplest details. If this content made sense to you, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Thus, you continue to follow reflections that can transform your way of thinking. And, who knows, their way of living.